crisis in Puerto Rico. Millions of Americans are still without power and are struggling to meet basic needs after Hurricane Maria. Assisted suicide, personal stories from people choosing life over death. Protecting children, a report from Rome on the world's first global conference aimed at eliminating child abuse. And the heart of Jesus' teaching.
8 Beats is a massive collaboration. I haven't seen anything else like it in the Catholic world.
How filmmakers are bringing the Beatitudes to the big screen. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, September 29th, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump pledges a relentless effort to help Puerto Ricans recover from hurricane devastation.
We've undertaken a massive federal mobilization to assist Puerto Rico, including the presence of over 10,000 federal personnel, including 5,000 U.S. military and National Guard personnel.
The president will visit Puerto Rico on Tuesday. It comes after some controversy with acting Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke. She told reporters the progress being made in Puerto Rico is, quote, a good news story. But those words have the mayor of Puerto Rico's capital, San Juan, incredibly upset.
Well, maybe from where she's standing, it's a good news story. When you're drinking from a creek, it's not a good news story. When you don't have food for a baby, it's not a good news story.
According to FEMA, nearly 1 million meals and roughly 2 million liters of water have been handed out across the U.S. territory, but aid distribution is being hampered by factors including damaged roads and a shortage of truck drivers. The State Department is ordering non-essential diplomats and all families of employees to leave Cuba following a string of mysterious sonic attacks, leaving some with hearing loss. It's also warning Americans not to visit Cuba. Officials are considering a range of additional measures, including possibly closing the embassy altogether. Cuba's government firmly denies any involvement in the sonic attacks. This week, the Trump administration announced it plans to resettle a maximum of 45,000 refugees in 2018. That's fewer this year and far fewer than 2016. Our partners have an in-depth look at the story, including what American bishops are saying. Read more now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. President Trump is revealing more plans to nominate conservative judges to top federal courts. This week he announced he will name 4 candidates to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, including Don Willett, who's serving on the Texas Supreme Court. Justice Don Willett, like many of Trump's nominees, is a conservative, but he stands out because of his popularity on Twitter. The world is a strange place when you read an opinion you're citing in a brief and realize, hey, I know that judge from Twitter. Willett describes himself as Tweeter Laureate of Texas, former rodeo bull rider, fluent in legalese, extravagantly blessed husband, and co-founder of 3 We Willets. Carrie Severino of the Judicial Crisis Network says he's a great choice.
This administration has really hit it out of the park with its judicial nominations. President Trump has time and again kept fulfilling his campaign promise. He's appointed not just Justice Gorsuch, of course, as he said, someone in the mold of Justice Scalia, who has an incredibly strong commitment to the Constitution, as it was written, to the laws as they were written. But now with all of these appellate nominees.
Severino notes Willett was on the president's original list of 21 potential Supreme Court nominees. As a candidate, Trump promised to, quote, appoint justices who, like Justice Scalia, will protect our liberty with the highest regard for the Constitution. Justice Antonin Scalia died in February of 2016, leaving a vacancy on the High Court. 1 year later, President Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch, who was confirmed in April of 2017. But it's not all smooth sailing, according to Severino. The former Supreme Court clerk says the Senate has been slow to get Trump's nominees to the floor for a vote.
When President Trump came into office, he had 105 vacancies. Now there are 145. Meanwhile, the Senate is confirming people at about 1 judge a month. I mean, there's no way to keep up with that kind of pace. So we really need to see more movement from the Senate.
Severino says there's no excuse for not getting the president's judicial nominees confirmed. Meanwhile, the White House announces President Trump and the First Lady are traveling to Asia in November. The Trumps will travel to Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, the Philippines, as well as Hawaii from November 3rd through the 14th. The president will participate in a series of meetings as well as discuss the importance of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Passion erupts over assisted suicide as a growing number of states debate its legalization, but people with disabilities are fighting back, saying life is worth living. They share their stories with Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi.
For Kimberly Hale of Texas, fighting assisted suicide is personal.
You don't know how many people have told all of us, you guys should be dead.
Kimberly was born with cerebral palsy, and then a drunk driver left her with a spinal cord injury. She feels sympathy for people with life-threatening illness.
There's more to life than pain or suffering.
Kimberly backs a new measure sponsored by congressmen of both parties, which condemns assisted suicide.
Protecting the most vulnerable is our statement. It is our mission.
But hecklers interrupt.
But for you to stand there in your duplicity and your sanctimony to talk about patients' lives as if you care.
Why do you think that you should impose your will and your beliefs on me?
Bills proposed in states across the country would legalize assisted suicide. In these 6 states, plus D.C., it's already allowed.
It normalizes the idea that some people are better off dead, and that death is a solution to pain.
Elaine Kobe survived getting stabbed in the back exactly 40 years ago tomorrow. And yet, she's still fighting for her life.
We have to get to the point where all human beings are seen as valuable spirits, that we are not better off dead.
Kimberly echoes that message of hope.
I deserve to be here. You deserve to be here. We all do. And we're all here for a reason.
10 congressmen, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats are sponsoring the bill to condemn assisted suicide. They're looking for a lot more support here than a vote to send a strong message to the country. Wyatt?
Jason, some pro-life issues are very partisan. Why do you think this resolution is drawing support from people on both sides of the aisle?
When you talk to these people, they give various reasons for opposing assisted suicide, but they do have an uphill battle. If you look at the most recent poll numbers from Gallup, they find that 73% of Americans actually support physician-assisted suicide.
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. President Trump is touting his proposed tax cuts again, this time to the National Association of Manufacturers.
This will be the lowest top marginal income tax rate for small and medium-sized businesses in more than 80 years. The lowest in 80 years. And it will be rocket fuel for our economy.
The Trump tax plan would cut taxes for corporations, simplify tax brackets, and nearly double the standard deduction used by most tax filers. Many details are still to be fleshed out. We're joined by Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. So, Philip, Democrats say that President Trump's proposed tax cuts will benefit the rich, him in particular, but the White House says this is going to benefit the middle class. Who's right?
Well, I don't think Chuck Schumer and the Democrats would have been able to come up with any other line except for the fact that this tax plan supposedly helps the rich. But the one number that I think we all need to keep in mind is that with this tax plan, the GOP would be reducing the corporate rate from where it is right now at 35% down to 20%. The rest of the world has a corporate income tax rate around 23%. So overnight, businesses would be more competitive. And yes, it would help the rich, but it would help businesses create more jobs here in the United States.
Gary Cohn, the White House National Economic Council director, says people don't buy homes because of mortgage deduction. And that's like obviously when you deduct home mortgage and interest in terms of your taxes. Is he right about that?
Well, he took a lot of heat for that. In the middle of the White House briefing, you had a lot of reporters tweeting out that this just factually wasn't true. And I'll be honest with you, I rent. I'm a millennial, like so many of us who require a landlord to keep a roof over our head. But so to figure out whether or not this is true, I actually looked up none other than Jonathan Gruber. He's the architect of Obamacare, and in a Princeton study that he did with the University of Copenhagen, they found that there was no impact on sales. Instead, the mortgage impact is something that the real estate industry, they're really fond of saying, well, using it as another selling point of telling buyers, well, you can buy a bigger house because you can deduct this on your taxes later on.
Interesting. Vice President Mike Pence says Republicans in Congress are going to pass the largest tax cut in American history, Do you think that's a realistic goal? I mean, right now the Republicans can't get a repeal and replacement of Obamacare through.
I still remember the president talking about how we'd be winning so much that we would get tired of it. This administration hasn't been able to move anything significant to the finish line. They absolutely failed when it came to Obamacare, and all we've heard is promises, and all we've seen are outlines as far as tax reform is concerned. The big problem here is that if they fail on this one, they'll go into 2018 having achieved absolutely nothing, and that's hard to convince voters to show up to the polls when you haven't given them anything in return.
Absolutely. It is going to be a big one, so we'll have to see how the tax reform goes. Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
The stream of Rohingya refugees fleeing Myanmar into Bangladesh continues, with more than 500,000 people fleeing since August. The United Nations says aid agencies are struggling to provide shelter for the ethnic minorities. Myanmar's military launched what they called clearance operation after Rohingya insurgents targeted security forces in attacks last month. The Filipino government denounces nearly 40 nations, including the U.S., Britain, and France, after the countries urged it to end thousands of anti-drug killings. The Department of Foreign Affairs says it hopes the nations will respect Manila's domestic processes. The country's president, Rodrigo Duterte, has cracked down hard on drug criminals. Another Catholic priest has been abducted in Nigeria. A Vatican news agency reports the priest was on his way back to his parish when he was taken by gunmen. 3 priests have been kidnapped in southern Nigeria this year alone. A Vatican diplomat already under suspicion for crimes related to child pornography in the U.S. has now been accused of uploading child porn in Canada. Police in Windsor, Ontario have issued an arrest warrant for Monsignor Carlo Capella. The Vatican recalled Capella after the U.S. State Department notified it of a possible violation of laws. Just days after Pope Francis met with his Sex Abuse Commission, another initiative in Rome to defend children from sex predators is taking place next week. It will bring together experts, politicians, and tech leaders who will come up with a plan to keep kids safe online.
We will try to sort out some action points that will then be incorporated in the declaration that will be adopted by the participants of the Congress at the end of Thursday's meetings. Then that will be brought to the Holy Father.
It's the world's first global conference aiming to protect the dignity of kids in the digital era. It's organized by the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Juliette Lindley is EWTN News Nightly's Vatican correspondent. She joins us now from Rome. Juliette, what sets this conference apart from other meetings that have taken place?
Wyatt, this is the first time that top representatives from so many different platforms are tackling online child sex abuse. So you have government representatives, you have Interpol, you have NGOs and foundations protecting minors, but we also have big internet names like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, as well as other organizations and scientists and even representatives of different religions. Now, not present will be victims or survivors of abuse. The conference organizers said they didn't want to involve children, but they will have young adults in their early 20s to talk about the risks that are out there and to talk about what to expect when you are a child online nowadays.
Well, can you give us some background on online sex abuse of minors and what really can be done to protect children?
Let's look at the numbers. If there are 3.2 billion internet users globally, a quarter of them are underage. So that's 800 million children who every day face the risk of being facing predators or being molested by child sex abusers. So that's a lot. So first of all, we need to educate children and teach them how to be responsible when they are online. And then, of course, we need to look at a higher level, at a leadership level, to be able to implement mechanisms that can stop these predators from doing what they've been doing.
It's incredible how much this is happening. What does the church hope to accomplish with this conference in particular?
Well, it's certainly another step taken to combat what Pope Benedict had called the open wound of abuse. So certainly they want to protect children in this digital era, defend children, but also try to create new mechanisms, legislation, international accords, which will protect children at a higher level.
Sounds like such an important conference needed in this day and age. Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pope Francis is preparing to focus on the harmful effects of fake news. The Holy Father tweeted today, "I have chosen this theme for World Communications Day 2018. The truth will set you free. Fake news and journalism for peace." The Communications Day falls on May 13th, 2018. Coming up, Medicaid coverage for abortion, reaction to legislation signed in Illinois, and mental health, why it's important for businesses to help their employees. It was on this date 39 years ago, Pope John Paul I was found dead in his Vatican apartment just over a month after becoming the head of the Catholic Church. Karol Wojtyła was then elected and took the papacy, taking the name John Paul II. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The Republican governor of Illinois signs a bill allowing state health insurance and Medicaid to cover abortions. The law allows taxpayer money to pay for them. We got reaction from Illinois Right to Life.
It is just devastating and beyond disappointing that our governor ignored the voices of his state citizens, every member of his political party, and went against his promise.
Illinois Right to Life is now looking into legal action. The state's Department of Health Care and Family Services estimates the annual taxpayer cost of abortions under the measure would be $1.8 million. A judge in Louisiana rules a jury cannot consider what a teen told a priest in confession. The case involves a woman who says she told a priest she was being molested and the priest didn't report the abuse. The priest refused to testify or even confirm he heard the girl's confession. The judge says only the Catholic Church can determine whether a conversation between a young person and a priest was a confession. 25% of adults in America suffer from a mental health illness. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Not only does that have an impact on the individual and family, but it also affects the workplace. Lauren Ashburn spoke with an expert in the business world on how to handle this delicate issue with employers.
We're joined by Jay Richards, assistant professor in the School of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America. He's also right here, host of Force for Good on EWTN. Welcome to News Nightly.
Thanks, Lauren. Good to be with you.
The economic burden of mental illness, including depression and bipolar disorders, was estimated at $83 billion. That's in 2000, just in the United States. What can businesses do to help their employees who are dealing with mental illness, but at the same time, maintain their fiscal responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the dilemma, because you imagine, okay, if I'm a company, I'm in business to make a profit and to serve customers, what do I do with employees that are struggling? And so I think, honestly, the best thing to do, both morally and from a business perspective, is to treat your employees like human beings, flesh and blood human beings with bodies and souls.
And how does that line up with Catholic social teaching? It seems to line up perfectly.
Yeah, it does, obviously. But I mean, probably the most fundamental principle of Catholic social teaching is human dignity. The fact that every individual has intrinsic value simply as a creature made in the image of God. And CEOs and managers that treat their employees in that way, that treat them as persons created in the image of God, I think are not only going to be better spiritually and morally, but they're going to have a better company. They're going to produce whatever good or service that they produce better than they would otherwise.
But here are the critics saying, okay, you know, you're getting a mental health day and you're really going to be on the golf course doing that. I mean, there's a lot of derision, a lot of misunderstanding about mental health. So how can it be addressed? How can businesses help to make mental illness not a stigma?
I think they have to really make the point explicitly. As you said, a lot of companies have Mental Health Day sort of as a provision, but people tend to use them sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's sort of everybody knows I'm actually going fishing, or I'm just going to a baseball game. And first of all, I think we have to sort of surface the issue. We have to treat mental illness as an illness. It's as much an illness as a cold or a heart attack. Anxiety attacks and depression, these are real things that millions of people struggle with. And I think we have to first destigmatize it and then empower employees so that if that's what they're struggling with, it won't be taken advantage of by employees that are simply going fishing, but it will be used by people who actually need it. And they won't feel like they have to suppress or pretend that this isn't a problem.
And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 73% of full-time employees do get sick time. And I think paid sick time, paid sick leave. And so that is something that also plays into this.
It does. I actually talked to a couple of people about this issue who struggle with depression and anxiety, and they told me, I have a wonderful employer, but it scares me to death that I would mention this to a manager because either I wouldn't get a raise or I wouldn't get a promotion. I think that's a problem that healthy companies need to address.
Thank you so much. Jay Richards, assistant professor in the School of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America.
Up next, the Beatitudes. How a group of Catholic filmmakers are depicting the heart of Jesus' teaching. And the Pope's ride in Chile. New details about how the Holy Father will get around when he visits Chile next year. Today we honor the messengers from God, Saints Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, the archangels. Although angels appear often in Scripture, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael are the only ones named. You can head to EWTN News Nightly's Facebook page now to view a reflection on the archangels from our chaplain, Father Patrick Mary. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The 8 Beatitudes sum up the core of Christ's teachings. You may know some by heart. For example, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now a group of Catholic filmmakers, all millennials, are working on a movie called 8 Beats. It's a project being produced by 8 teams across the country. Each team is creating a film inspired by one of the Beatitudes. I spoke with one of the filmmakers last week. Joining us now is Max Haben, one of the filmmakers. He's directing the film being produced by the Northeast team. So Max, what is your Beatitude, and tell me how you're transforming it into a short film?
Well, I'm directing the Northeast team, and our Beatitude is blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And naturally our movie or our film will revolve around the theme of mercy. And right now we're in the process of exploring a story about a young boy and his father. So, and exploring how that relationship, how mercy plays out within their relationship.
Sure. Well, mercy is such a fascinating beatitude. Like I said, it's something that Pope Francis has talked about so much. Tell me, what are the other teams working on? Are they taking individual beatitudes? Describe this for me.
Yeah, so each team, there's 8 teams from around the country, mostly made up of younger, more millennial generation filmmakers. And each team has one of the 8 beatitudes assigned to them. Like I said, ours is blessed are the merciful, but you know, there's other teams that have blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, and you know, all the other beatitudes. So each team has to figure out a way to tell a story with that theme in mind.
And you know, spreading the gospel through film, it seems simple when we just say it, but it can be a tall order, a lot of work here. So tell me about your spiritual journey here as you've kind of been going through this process. How have you developed, have you thought about mercy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as a director, when I make films, I try to tell stories from a personal place and from my own life experiences. So it's been an opportunity for me to reflect on, you know, how I've experienced or not experienced mercy in my own life, and also reflect on just the, you know, what the actual virtue or idea of mercy means in the context of Scripture and of our faith. And you know, that's a good reflection to do, because I think a lot of times the word mercy can kind of get you know, blended together with some of these other words like compassion or you know, and it's good to kind of reflect on what does mercy actually mean. You know?
Sure, absolutely. Being able to take it and focus just on mercy, so powerful. Tell me, where can viewers watch the final project, and tell me about the timeline here.
Well, right now, all the teams are pretty much in the pre-production to production phase, and so over the next 3 to 4 months, we're hoping to start production and get moving on finishing these films, and then hopefully around the springtime, the films will be available. Right now, I think it's kind of tentative what the plan is, but we're hoping to do some sort of launch or festival where we can screen the films, and then after that, I'm assuming we'll have some sort of distribution plan where you know, those films can be watched. But I know people can follow along on 8beatsmovie.com. That's 8, the number 8, beatsmovie.com, and follow along with some of the details and just kind of keep track of where things are at.
Well, it is such a fascinating project, and it's great for you to be able to come in here and tell us all about it. Max Haben with 8 Beats Movie. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, when the Pope visits Chile in January, his Popemobile may look familiar. The commission planning the visit says the Holy Father will use Popemobiles from his trip to the United States in 2015 and his trip to Mexico last year. It comes at the Pope's request to carry the message of environmental sustainability. The 2 Jeep Wranglers will transport Francis during the January trip. And of course, stay with EWTN as we will bring you all of the updates on that upcoming visit. We thank you for watching this week. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.